swipe, or no?
Actually,
It's
no,
just
right click.
just this.
Yep.
Okay, got it. Oh, thank you.
All the way, or? Yep. Awesome. Thanks.
All right. Have a good one.
Thanks. Okay, I think we're going to get started. Some people are going to still file in. There's a long line for food out there. But thank you for coming to another installment of the Yale Center for Consumer Insights Colloquium on Marketing Leadership, where we welcome leaders in practice to engage in dialogue with students from SOM and across Yale. I'm very pleased today to welcome Christine Barton, Partner and Managing Director at the Boston Consulting Group in Dallas. Christine has leadership roles in BCG's Center for Consumer and Customer Insights, the firm's consumer, marketing, sales, and pricing practices, and she regularly publishes her research in BCG Perspectives, which is an online source for articles and analysis on corporate strategy. Today, she will present on demand-centric growth, which is proven across categories such as CPG, food and beverage, specialty, retail, apparel, restaurants, hotels, and travel, inorganically growing low-growth sectors and brands. Christine will describe the why, the who, the what, and the how of demand-centric spaces, illustrating her point with examples from across industries. Finally, Christine is a fellow Yalie. She joined the Boston Consulting Group full-time after earning a law degree from Yale Law School. She also holds a master's from Oxford University, where she was a Rhodes Scholar after she graduated from the University of Texas at Austin. Please, when asking questions today, use your microphone. This is going to be recorded so that people can watch the video later. And join me in welcoming Christine to SOM.
Great, thank y'all. We're not going to actually start the presentation for a few minutes, but what I thought we might do, and I'll tell you a little bit more about what I actually do as well for my work. But I thought we might take the first 5 minutes, and if you have questions about my career or my background, I'm happy to take them. I'm happy to take them now while we wait for some other folks from outside to join us. So we talked a little bit about my background in terms of education, where I reside. I'm not sure why that's toggling. Yeah. But let me tell you a little bit about the businesses that I help. So I am primarily in the vanity categories. I work in apparel, luxury, footwear, and handbags. I then also work in specialty retail. I ran our specialty retail and department store business globally for about 6 years. I just gave that up this year. And given the ownership structure of those two things, I work a lot in private equity. So I've done about 70 due diligences, mostly in those categories and other categories like personal care, travel and tourism in the last 6 years. I also work a lot with portfolio companies, which means I have a bit of a specialization in mid-sized companies ranging anywhere from 500 million to 5 billion. So that's what I do in terms of my sector focus. The reason I'm probably here today is more of my functional focus, which is really on growth and in particular insight-led growth or insight-led turnaround. As part of that, I have some global leadership responsibilities for our Center for Consumer and Customer Insight. I lead BCG's generational research with a focus on millennials, but to understand the millennials, also understanding Gen Xers, which is my generation, and boomers, which is the generation above me. I run our global consumer sentiment research, which is about 50,000 consumers every other year in 15 or so developed and developing countries. And then this last year, I was named a BCG Fellow, and my topic is going to be the future of consumer knowledge and insights. A fellowship just means I've got about 30% of my time protected for the next 3 years to focus on something that's not immediately commercial, hopefully commercial in the midterm or in the next 10 years, but really something that's a little farther out than the immediate commercial demands. So that's a little bit about me. I haven't been back to Yale and New Haven probably in 10 years. I graduated here 16 years ago from law school. I did not practice law. I went straight into consulting. I've been with BCG for 16 years. I've been in a number of our offices, started in Dallas when it was 35 people. It's 135 now. I've been to Toronto by choice. I've been to Chicago where I was made partner by choice, and then back to Dallas, though, living in Kansas City. So that's a little bit about me. I often find in these things you have as much interest in the topic as you do in paths and what it's like to work at various places or how people make it work. So if you have any questions around that, my background, what I do, where I've come from, I'm happy to take those now, and we'll jump into the presentation in about 2 or 3 minutes.
How did you find yourself specializing in like retail and luxury?
Yes. So it's a great question. I started out back in the day, 16 years ago, consulting was very generalist. It's moving through a period of specialization. But I was an early person to specialize because what I knew about myself inherently was I was going to be much more powerful on content than I was going to be, an inch deep and a mile wide. So I started focusing in our technology, media, and telecommunications. I wasn't an engineer, so that meant I was focusing more on telecommunications and media. And what I was doing in my spare time and on the weekends is I was shopping, personally, but also hopefully with a commercial lens. And I was reading rags about those categories. And I said, this is crazy because we have these sectors in the firm and I can align what I want to do with my private time with what I want to do with my personal time. And about 2 to 2.5 to 3 years into BCG, I made the switch and I've been there for 13 years. So that's how I did it. Other questions? Ready? Okay. All right, we'll come back to questions, but let me talk a little bit about demand-centric growth. So you hear demand-centric growth, and you're probably like, what is that? So it is a methodology, and I'm going to talk to you about the methodology, just given your background. I think it'll be of unique or particular interest to you. But it's not just a methodology. It's not just about generating insights and generating interpretation from those insights. It's what do I do to translate those insights into the actions that businesses need to take over their products, over their marketing strategy, over their channel strategy, in stores with packaging, whatever the case may be. And once I have that playbook or that translation or the what to go do, how do I get the organization to do it? Because these things don't live in one function, they live cross-functionally. They have massive investment profiles behind them. And companies are challenged with the need to, in low growth environments, raise margin, reduce cost, and it puts a premium on where they put the management's time and where they put investment. So demand-centric growth covers all three of those. It covers superior insights and interpretation, and I personally believe this methodology yields that. It covers the superior translation of that, and then it covers the superior execution. And I'm going to focus more on the methodology, but I'm happy to talk about the translation and the execution as well. So let me give you a little background on why. We've been doing this for about 10 years, this particular methodology. We've honed it at a number of clients. It's created literally billions in valuation. It's hundreds of millions of dollar business for BCG. And what I like about it is I've personally, and as the firm, has applied it over a number of sectors. So it works in retail, it works in vertically integrated retail, which is different. It works in branded retail, which is different. It works for brands. It works for turning around departments. It works across price points. It works across consumer segments. It works across company size, so the biggest to 300 million, 500 million. It works across individual brands and banners as well as portfolios. And we're not going to do a lot about our client credentials here, but if you hear clients talking about this in the marketplace and to their investors, and one of the examples, sanitized examples I'm going to take you through, at month 2 or 3, they were talking to their investor group kind of about this methodology and the results that it's going to have for that business. So it's very powerful. So what's at the heart of what you're trying to understand when you do demand-centric growth? So basically growth that is fueled by understanding why people buy and how to influence why they buy. You have a whole bunch of questions around the who. So who's in my store, who's online? Is that the customer I even want? It might be the customer I built the business on, but is that the customer of my future? If I didn't build my business with that customer, do I keep the core and try to court the new customer, or do I migrate over time? Where? So why does he or she come to my brand? What occasion? What emotional need? What are they trying to fulfill uniquely from us versus from someone else? Are those spaces large enough for me to grow? Because if I'm a very big company working in a very small space, then I'm going to tap out my headroom growth. Any point of incremental growth is going to be much more difficult, much less predictable to get. What do the technical and functional benefits look like to really play in that space? What does financial success look like, operational success, cultural success, and how do we make it happen? Those are the types of questions that companies are struggling with when they do that, when they do this type of work. So I'm going to talk through 10 things, again, more focused on the methodology. These examples are live, but they are also sanitized, so I'm not showing you anything that was recommended. I've sanitized all of that out. I've left some detail in so that we can get a flavor for what it is. It's hard to work with something fully sanitized, but please keep in mind you're not seeing anything that was directly recommended to the client. So the first thing that's distinct about this methodology is that we map the market on emotional needs, not on consumer segments, right? So you may be very familiar with segmenting based on demographic and life stage, segmenting even based on behavior. Behavior plays a role here, but what we're trying at the heart of this to understand is what are those irrational motivations or those latent needs or those primal needs that you're trying to fulfill when you engage in the market that the brand covers, whether that's bars or whether that's alcoholic beverage or whether that's travel or whether that's apparel or footwear or whatever the case may be. So that's the first. And then the second point is, as I said in the introduction, this is very broadly applicable. So it works for a lot of different business models. It works for retailers, brands, private brands, departments alike. So I'm not going to really speak to this slide other than to say effectively kind of what you see on this side is that when we do our segmentations, and whether you're going to look at demographic segments or you want to look at behaviors or other ways that you might segment on geography, we tend to get more variation between our segments than more historical ways of segmenting. And we think that variation is predictive, and we think that variation describes and holds segments together, so that's pretty important to us. And when I go back and map motions to total shareholder return or increase in revenue or increase in margin dollars, I tend to get a better relationship between buying from emotion and satisfying that. When I look at the best brands lists out there, I get more relationship from emotional segments than I do any other segments that I've looked at. So what do I mean by we map markets on emotions, not on people? What we do is we go into qual or through 10, 15, 20 years of serving customers in these categories, there's a set of underlying emotional statements that people make explicitly or implicitly about a category. We're talking right now about a health and wellness category, and this lens right here is the categories. So you might think of things like protein powders, or bars, or vitamins, or minerals, or supplements. That's the category we're talking about right now. And what you find is that when you kind of segment on the emotional states, you'll get a set of emotions that group together discretely and that are separate from other emotions. So let me give you an example of that. So we have one here about, I want to reduce the risk of medical issues later in life. That's right here. We have one about, I want to live longer. So live longer is I want to add years to my life. Live better is I want to add life to my years. There's a number of these actually tend to segment into look emotions, into do emotions, and into feel emotions, this particular market. Now, what is very interesting, I think, maybe you will too, is that the reason you as a consumer engage in a category is not the reason you choose your retailer. So if you're a retailer, and if you don't have private brands, so you're not actually a quasi-branded manufacturer, you're a pure retailer, you have a different set of emotions that consumers may be coming to you for. These are the same categories, so these are the same types of categories, but now from a retailer angle. So you get emotions around safety. Are you curating or navigating me as a retailer to safe product? Is it pure? Is it innovative and cutting edge? Are you a socially responsible retailer? Do I trust you? Are you convenient? Am I getting a good value? Those are among the retail reasons for being. Now, what's particularly interesting is if you're a vertically integrated retailer, what's the implication if you're a vertically integrated retailer? Anyone? It means you're playing in the category emotions and the retailer emotions alike, right? So you have many, many more spaces that you can potentially differentiate on or aggregate together to make a bigger space. But it also means the answer is likely more complex for you. So that gets to number 3. So the methodology tells you definitively which positionings bring other emotions along and which positionings polarize. So you're probably like, what does that mean? What does that even mean? All right, so how you read this chart is these are the category positions. Wait, just make sure I got that right. Yeah, the category positions around the top, the category positions on the y-axis. You read it vertically down. If it is red, it is negatively correlated. If it is a green cell, it is positively correlated. And the shading tells you the level of correlation. But a particularly good example here is on my retailer one, so I'll get to it next. But basically what you can see is when you look at these spaces and how they relate to one another, you start to get effectively meta spaces. So spaces that can move together because they're not polarized in a consumer's mind. And when you put spaces together, the market gets bigger. Your ability to serve it gets bigger. So if you become a big brand, go ahead.
What is an example of something that polarizes the consumer's mind?
Yep, I'm going to it right now. All right, so the question is what polarizes? All right, let me find, give me 1 second. This is the one I found fascinating. Okay, so I just took trust across, okay, and I circled this space right here, innovation. So what polarizes? In VMHS, you cannot be innovative and trusted. And guess what a lot of the companies try to stand for? Trust and innovation. So why is this the case? When something is innovative in these categories, they're effective, they're highly effective. They're effective at putting weight on, they're effective at losing weight, they're effective, right? Is that regulated? Is that got a long history of proven to be safe, right? So those things polarize. But lots of companies end up in a place where they're trying to serve emotions that pull apart in consumers' minds, and they don't even know it, right? So thank you for the lead-in question. I didn't plan her, by the way, but that's what it means to polarize. What you're looking at here is the retailer reasons of being across the top, the retailer reasons of being down the side. You can see that there's a set of things that go together around value, convenience, family-friendly, what I would call pure retail plays, if you will. There's a set of things really in the trust, pure, safe world that go together, right? And then there is a set of things that go together about how you treat trust me, it's sanitized, but trust me, it's about how you treat the customer when you're engaging with them in store and how you navigate them to a set of things. And so that's what I mean by the methodology tells you what goes together or what polarizes. Okay, And we are going to save questions, but go ahead. Points of clarification asked now. Go ahead.
Do we know what polarizes the customer's mind by interviewing them?
Ah, yes, the methodology. It's all quantitative, effectively. Basically, it uses a couple of methodologies. One that's most like conjoint, so it's basically MaxDiff, and the other is Kano. And we look at the mathematical relationship, if you will, between the emotional statements around innovation and the emotional statements around trust. All right, so not all spaces and emotional needs are created equal. So what do I mean by that? Well, I mean there's dollars associated with each of these cells. And some of those cells are very large, and some of those cells are very small, and some of those cells are very contested with competition, and some of those cells are relatively uncontested with competition. So now what are we looking at? Because remember, this is a vertically integrated retailer, so they can do what? They can play in anyone. They can play in both spaces. They can play in category spaces, and they can play in retailer spaces, and they can play potentially at the intersection. So you have retailer reasons for being, you have fitness motivations for being, or reasons you're engaged in these types of categories. The size of the bubble is the size of the dollars spent from your last trip in that motivation. These disassociation barriers are created by the slides I just showed you. What pieces go together and what pieces don't go together. So what happens, like where do you want to be on this? It's not a trick question. Where as a retailer do you want to be? Okay, yeah, so you're pointing up there into, I've got value and I'm general health motivations, right? I want to live better, I'm focused on longevity, I'm focused on putting good things in my body. Okay, right here. So what happens if you're over here? Do you sign up for no growth? What if I told you over here allowed for thousands of US stores, even thousands of more internationally, and they're looking for growth? What do they do? Okay, you have to move somewhere. So are you in the value and routine health, or are you somewhere else on the board?
Depends.
Okay, depends on what?
Depends on what CEO want to do, or also about the company. Right?
Okay, all right, well, there's a part of this vision, right? Like if this was cheat your customers over here, right, and do bad things, there are going to be CEOs that don't want to be in that space. All right, so that's very fair. So there's an element of having to move, so you got to figure out where. Is there any other thing you would be worried about? I mean, let's say your journey is here. Let's say it's not even all the way here. What do we have to worry about? Wait, I'm sorry. Somebody was talking about I didn't see.
Oh, I was going to say, sort of in the, what the transition process looks like.
So okay.
You're still staying in this routine health, future focused section. Who are you pulling over as you're moving sort of in this case along the, moving horizontally, and who are you going to lose?
Yeah, why? Why is that important?
Why is it important?
Yeah.
Well, ideally, you want to keep everybody you have and just add more, customers.
Yeah, because all your reinvestment dollars are sitting down here. And I've already told you, getting up over this is really hard to do, right? So that's actually the situation we found the client in. Didn't know prior to doing the work, but we found the client effectively in the green space. Wonderful business, very high return, very accretive stores, one of the best return on gross investment from a store network I've ever seen. Unbelievable growth. Why would that be the case? Why would they have had unbelievable growth being in this small part of the market?
They have a really niche consumer base.
Okay, that could be an answer. What else?
Uncontested space?
They have what?
uncontested space, so very few players in the market?
Yeah. So it's actually a combination of your answers, which is this used to be the entire market. 20 years ago, this was it. But our population aged, the millennials yourselves and the iGens below you came in and were concerned much more about what you were putting into your bodies, how that made you feel. The boomers aged with their massive generation, and you end up having a market that grew around what was the market 30 years ago, or 40, whatever the case might be. So any questions so far? Okay. All right. So the other thing you run into with segmentations, maybe you've experienced this in your own work, is you do the math, you get these segments out, the math tells you the segments hang together, and then you get into the behaviors, and there's nothing different about them. They don't buy differently. They don't look demographically differently. You can't find them in marketing because they all look like a jumbled mess, right? I mean, have you ever experienced that, or your segmentations are just much better than mine? This methodology guarantees the segments will be discrete, or at least I've done it 20 to 30 times and they've all been, so I shouldn't say guarantees. That was a little bit too much, but very strongly likely that you're going to get discrete segments. So these are the functional benefits. These functional benefits are derived mathematically to the emotional benefits, meaning I can mathematically show you that these functional benefits tie to this emotional space. These functional benefits tie to the emotional space called future-focused, longevity, reducing risk. These functional benefits tie to this emotional space. And if you look across these, there's not, I think, but one, maybe there's more, but on quick glance, there's not a lot that are shared, right? So they're discrete spaces. And it's not just the functional benefits. When I do this on the categories that I love, so apparel, fashion, luxury, I will look at your stylistic preference, and these are discrete stylistically too. So they're driving and nearly guaranteeing differences in a behavior, which means what? If you have differences in behavior and you can locate these people because you know things about them, why is that important? Why am I even excited about any of this?
Shift your product offering, better match their interests.
Yeah, you can be more relevant in product. What else?
You can market to them more efficiently.
Absolutely. You can reach them. You can be relevant in your marketing. What else? You can change their behavior. So maybe you don't have to do all of the product changes. Over time, you can have them come to you. So the sixth thing, I'm just checking how we're doing on time here. Yep, we're good. Sixth thing is our methodology. I already alluded to this or previewed it with you, but it mathematically links the brand ladder. Are you familiar with the brand ladder? Starts with emotions, functional benefits that you need to experience from the brand or the service, the technical things that the product or this experience need to deliver. So this methodology mathematically links those so that you are not doing it solely on experience or solely creatively or solely qualitatively. Gives you a lot more confidence. Doesn't mean it takes all of the test and learn, but this helps you really narrow down your field so that you're testing and learning in big and relevant spaces versus testing and learning in niche spaces without headroom for growth. So I'm going to show you a version of this. We're switching categories for a minute. Brand ladder is just so exceptionally sensitive. I'm going to show you a different category than the one we've been talking about, and I'm going to show you a space that we did not recommend just so you can get a flavor for what it is. But emotional benefits, That maps to your emotional segmentation. Those are the statements that consumers make that mathematically hang together. Functional benefits, what you have to deliver. Those were the things I said to you were different in our segmentation a few slides back. These are examples of functional benefits, right? Things you need to experience from the product or the service. Then I have a set of technicals. Everything below this is technicals. I have a set of technicals that's shared in the category. If it's shared in the category, I can't differentiate, but I have to do what? It's not a trick, it's on the slide. I have to play at parity if it's shared in the category because it's effectively a table stake, right? So I don't have to overinvest there, but I can't have too low of satisfaction, I can't have too low of association there because then I'm not going to get the financial performance. Then I have a set of technicals that have to do with retail and a set of technicals that have to do with product. This happens to be this is a pure retailer. This isn't a vertically integrated, but you would see product on a vertically integrated retailer too because either at the sub-brand level or because they're like apparel and the brand, the retail experience is the brand. It's just a distribution for the product, if you will. So if it's a must-have, I have to be at parity. If it's a nice-to-have, there's going to be a lot of these. I do not have to invest against all the nice-to-haves. I need to pick the ones that are most relevant or most thematic, and I distort my investment against those. Because if I try to invest across all consumer needs in these brand ladders, I will dissipate my investment. I will not have impact. I will not have credit or get consumer credit for that investment because it will not cut through the clutter. So let me show you an actual brand ladder. So recall now, these functionals mathematically tie to these. All of these technicals mathematically tie to the functionals and vice versa, right? You've got retail up here, and then you've got your product down here. And you can see this is exceptionally specific things, right? So the quality of the material, reflective of my style, these categories are apparel, fashion, accessories, handbags. Located near stores I frequently shop, the range of product offering on some of the category ones, materials must look real, the stones must be good quality for the price, the chain must be durable, the leather or the leatherette must be soft or supple to the touch. So why would you go through all this trouble to get something this specific? What's at the core of wanting to know this? Or one of the things at the core? Who owns all of the points here in an organization?
You mean a company?
Yeah, who owns them? Who in the company owns them?
The operation team, right?
Okay, so if it's a retail, you have a retail op team. Do they pick product? No. Okay, so marketing. Does marketing do quality control? Who else owns it?
Product design.
Product development and design. Do they do campaigns? Do they do marketing campaigns? Sorry, this is not doing my writing very well. Actually, much more legible than that. So you get my point. Outside of the CEO and maybe even his direct reports become functional. There's only one person in an entire organization, maybe two, that own this. So how do they organize to all go in the same direction? How do they invest against touch and not hardware? How do they invest against value versus lowest price? How do they invest against range versus depth or whatever? I mean, I'm giving examples. So organizations use this as a blueprint to organize their functions so that they're moving in the same direction across all of these things that actually deliver the brand at the rock face. Because is the brand product? Is it the marketing message? Is it at the in-store experience? Is it the online experience? Is it your experience in customer service? What is the brand? All of them. I don't think y'all do, because I think y'all were too young at the time. But does anybody remember the Softer Side of Sears campaign? You remember it? You want me to tell about it, or you want to tell about it? Okay. So, no, I wasn't putting you on the spot. I just mean, it's like a very short story, but they came out, I mean, Sears was like where you went to buy white goods and where you went to buy lawn equipment. They came out with massive advertising, traditional in the day because it was before digital. And it was, come see the softer side of Sears. It was aimed at women. It was about their soft lines. It was about their soft line home. It was accessories. It was footwear. And then you got in the store and you were like, it was a complete disconnect. Those products weren't relevant. They weren't, rationally located next to one another. There wasn't, a brand story that held it together. It was a massively effective marketing campaign that drove a lot of high dollar traffic into the stores that did what? Did not buy because it was not what they were promised. What is the more recent example of that happening, which we did not work on? JCPenney? Yep. Okay. All right. Our methodology is mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive, so MECE. I'll stop with that one and then get to the next one. But clients sometimes look at us and are like, why would I care about that? Okay, well, you care about it because when you are a CEO or a direct report to a CEO and you get a segmentation that comes out of the organization and they say all of the segments, they say two things, all of the segments are very valuable and none of it is MECE. It's all overlapping. So when you're trying to make trade-offs, how do you make a trade-off on segments that are all the same size and that are not MECE? So it's a very frustrating problem. So what this methodology does is it ascribes your motivation for your last trip because we run enough sample over it. It describes your motivation for the last trip as the primary driver to the sizing. And we do some checks on secondary drivers to the sizing. That's at the top line market level. But then we look at your relationship in the data to say, how far am I away from either industry leadership or industry average or median to the space that I want to be in, and what is that amount worth? And then we do some, slightly more sophisticated things around whether that's going to be driven by awareness, consideration, trial, share of wallet, so that we're triangulating to make sure that we don't come up with things that are going to grow retailers, 30% comps, which doesn't happen. Yes?
So for large CPG companies or big box chain stores, Target, that are trying to appeal to a very broad category of people that have very different spend habits, and it's probably a wise business strategy to appeal to such a broad crowd.
Yep.
How do they reconcile?
Yeah, so great question. Usually at the department level, because usually it's at the role of the category level that they're doing it. Now there will be some meta spaces that they might stand for. So Target used to stand for cheap, chic. It's kind of lost that positioning. So there are some meta spaces. Walmart was lowest price, not just value, but historically lowest price. So there are some of that. But when you get into multi-department store, pure retail, you're really often looking at a department level or a role of category
I
level.
mean, it's interesting because a lot of these CPG companies are known for like their trusted brands, but are trying to now redevelop themselves as the new sexy innovative
Yeah.
thing, which might not work.
Yeah, well, CPG works with this methodology beautifully because it basically creates an emotional portfolio, and then you put your brands on it. What you'll often find is when CPG thinks it's got a non-overlapping portfolio because it's looked at functional benefits or it's looked at occasions like on the go or it's looked at something like that, an emotional landscape can often show overlaps where a product is sitting on top or a brand is sitting on top of another brand in a way that they've never looked at it before. So it shows white space portfolio moves. It's not the only lens, it's a lens, but it's a pretty compelling lens. So as I mentioned, the methodology quantifies the value to the client's brand that we're talking about from the positioning options. What I'll tell you here is this is shown to you in estimated comp sales because it happened to be a retail example, which just means the total value creation over 3 or 5 years, whatever the relevant time frame is. There's basically a curve to that you think you can get to in terms of how you attack the work and how fast customers will move. That translates into a level of same-store sale comp or stores that have been open a year or more comp. So this is showing it to you in comp. You see the absolute dollars. You see the absolute dollars kind of in the bars. This part is additive, so you get this plus one of these. These are the ones that are not additive over here on the blue side. And what you'll come to in the research is you often find what I'm not sure I'd call them quick fixes because they might not be quick to get to, but they're foundational. So if this, I'll give you examples. If this was a quality objection, or it was a value objection, or it was some kind of basic objection where you were much lower as a brand than you should be, then you would have an initiative to go raise this no matter what positioning you're going after because you don't want to be so out of balance in one of those foundational. This is an occasion lens, so this had to do with replenishment. They were getting a lot of trial, but they were not getting replenishment of some of their core margin drivers. And then this is their true positioning options here in terms of the value to the brand. This has all been sanitized. I'm not going to spend too long on it, but effectively what we do is then we tee up a conversation with the CEO and the ELT about where they're going because, by the way, the things under here look very different depending on if you're in this space, or this space, which you could be due to the dollars there and due to your starting point. But what you go do, very different. So we tee up the executive conversation and decision. Okay, this is an eye chart. You're not meant to read it. I'm just going to tell you what's here, and then I'm going to show you some of the slides behind it. I told you this is your emotional space. It's just laid out differently. Here's your functional spaces laid out differently. Your technical attributes laid out differently. Then what I can do is I can look at your satisfaction at a brand level for you, and I can look at it for people in the peer set. And the green means consumers are over-associated or over-satisfied, depending on if it's a functional or technical. Red means that consumers are under-associating that factor or under-satisfied with that factor. So why do we care? Okay. This is Victoria's Secret, not the client, nothing confidential here. They were a peer brand in the response set. The emotional positioning is sexy. The category is intimate apparel. These are the technical benefits that mathematically ladder up to sexy in intimate apparel. What does the green tell you for Victoria's Secret? Way over-associated. Probably a brand halo. Doesn't matter, way over-associated, right, on all of these technicals. The client wants to position as sexy. So what does this tell you? Someone's saying that's like a no way, right? Okay. Your client will say, it's not fair. Yes?
Over-associated here is a positive term, or?
Well, so over-associated, if it's a positive factor, is positive. Under-associated on a positive factor would be positive. But these are mostly positive, but yes, it's a good question. Your client will whine, and they will say, that's not fair. I am technically superior to Victoria's Secret in cup molding. Technically superior, right? And you will say very tactfully, it does not matter what you think. It does not matter what I think. It matters what they think, and they don't think you are. So you have a couple of things you can do. One, if it's truly a perceptional gap, you can invest against educating in the perception. If it is truly a technical gap, you can invest against the technical. Or you can do what we said, which is there is no way this brand should be positioned as sexy. It is too expensive for the upside. So position at a more achievable space because you cannot afford it.
Quick question. So,
Sure.
For this brand, do
Yeah.
they just want to be perceived as sexy, or do they want to make money in the sector?
So is it a designer-led, irrational founder brand? No, this is a money-making brand, a money machine. This is not an irrational designer founder.
Sir, I'm just a little bit confused as to how the sexy ties back to some of these technical.
I know.
But so in theory, like me as a consumer, my idea of sexy,
So
consciously or not.
they're not asked as one question because you would never get anything but a rational answer if they were asked as one question, right? Everything that seems like it should be sexy, lace or mesh or high cut or low cut or whatever, would be what you would get if you asked it straightforward.
Right.
So basically, you do it through, it's a complex answer, but effectively, we do it through breaking up the questions. We do it through running massive amounts of sample over it so that everybody gets sufficient exposure to the factors but never has to take 100 factors. We do it through multiple methodologies that triangulate. And then these things mathematically link back to the last reason that you purchased for an intimate apparel, which your last purchase was sexy, right? And then the way that we know that it works, in addition to our clients making money on it, the way that we know it works methodologically is that when you then ask Victoria's Secret satisfaction with technicals, association with functionals, you get over association or over satisfaction. And by the way, there are ones I didn't show you here where Victoria's Secret is red. They just don't map to sexy. Right? That's not that Victoria's Secret doesn't have red. It just has red where it doesn't care, which is the emotional space that's about practicality, or the emotional space that's about athleticism, or the emotional space that's, about something else, but not sexy. Okay. All right, I got to pick up the pace because I want to stop for questions, though you've been good along the way, so I feel like we're getting some questions in. All right. The other thing the methodology can do is for those retailers or for those vertically integrated retailers that could play in between spaces, in between retailer and category, or between two spaces, this methodology will look for a bridge. Why would you need a bridge? Give me an example of when you would need a bridge. Why can't I just go full into, in that last example, why can't I just go full into sexy? Yeah, right. So if I don't hit it out of the park, then I've lost all the customers for whom I did stand something. I stand nothing for sexy. I have no reinvestment dollars. My top line goes down. The brand gets distressed or goes out of business. Okay, what you're looking at here is, let me orient myself. category reasons for being, or category motivations, retailer reasons for being. Green line is the best peer out of 32. Red line is the worst peer out of 32. The gray, sorry, let me clear that. The gray is the client. Okay, so on some spaces around looking versus feeling, the client does very well. On some spaces around the experience, the client does very well. On spaces around value and on spaces around trust, the client does not do well. Recall, we're over here. You told me if I try to go here or even go here too fast, I will lose because I can't deliver on the promise. So what happens if I cannot sustain my growth aspiration and my total shareholder value creation in this space? What if I have to move? How do I do it? Well, the first answer is you do it planfully, and the second answer is you do it over time. You do not fire your customer because you don't have any reinvestment dollars. The words don't matter here. This is this ladder to own the core. This is the ladder to reposition. There are some shared functional and technical benefits. There are some shared functional technical benefits. One thing you can do is you can bridge. So that's what we mean by step 8. Okay, now that's the methodology piece. Just a couple of quick things about translation and execution. So this, I hope I've convinced you that this is some cool, exciting stuff that, believe me, I have not seen in the marketplace. Doesn't matter if it's by consulting firms, doesn't matter if it's by CPG, financial services, agencies, whatever the case may be. I truly believe in my 16 years it's unique. It doesn't mean it's important. It's important, don't get me wrong. But if you cannot take these insights and you are the only person that knows them in an organization or as a service provider, who cares? Like, who cares? So defining and describing where to play, how to win, and when to sequence your investment is every bit as important as the insight and the interpretation. And for that, we tend to use, I'm going to give you a retail example. So I tend to use the P's in the categories I work in retail and the business models I work in. So that is basically positioning, people, planning in terms of your brand. The pillars are your assortment strategy, which are product, private label, packaging, pricing. Your marketing strategy is projection. That's the only place the P's gets a little funky, projection for marketing, and promotion. And then your channel is place, that's online, offline, mobile, catalog, placement, which is visual merchandising, people, and then there's a set of enablers that prop that up. You are not meant to read any of the next slides. I am just going to show you the level of detail that the methodology goes. What the brand essence is and isn't, what the promise is and isn't, what the personality is and isn't. What do you need to do on assortment? Okay. What do you need to do to the product, to private label, to packaging? What do you need to do in marketing, projection, promotion, loyalty, channel, placement, and people? These are more fun slides. I'm switching categories now because the other ones weren't as visual. The categories really don't lend itself. Then your CEO will read an elevated version of this. The heads of function will read an elevated version of this. Your strategic initiatives officer will live by this Bible. Even your heads of merchandising. Well, I take that back. Your merchants won't. But what your merchants will do is look at something like this. All of this is mathematically derived, but it is all displayed as if it were not, as if it were creatively derived, experientially derived, vision derived. It's not, okay? But this is an example of an edit point that you would use with a merchant group or with a marketing group, right? Who is she? Describing that. Who are her alter egos? Who are her style references? How does she describe her own personal style? Where on the fashionability curve is she? How does she spend her time? Where does she wish she spent her time? What she is not is as important, right? Because you will think you're talking about a space and suddenly somebody will switch and they'll start talking about trust and you're like, nope, not talking about trust, talking about something else, right? So what is she not? Very important. I just had to throw this in for the cool factor because, come on guys, like mathematically derived where she will wear more jewelry. Doesn't it just look like I took a red pen and colored that in? All right, that's my throwaway slide, but I just had to get it out there. What trends she's wearing now. If she understands a trend, can she call its level of fashionability correctly? The data would say yes. Her categories by her requirements by category. So one of the things that I like to do in this is frequency analysis in a category will tell you a customer you have, what are they most likely to want you to invest in, right? And it's really a measure conceptually of conversion because you've already won their consideration into the brand or into the store. But a unique and unduplicated reach analysis, which I'm sure you're learning, will tell you reach. So if I need to attract new customers, if I need to attract new consideration, what I invest in, the priorities I invest in are different from the ones that I invest in or can be different than the ones I invest in to drive conversion. So you have to fundamentally know what problem do I have. Do I have a repeat purchase problem and a repeat traffic problem of existing customers? Or do I have a new traffic problem, not due to awareness, but due to consideration? And how do I invest? So, and then marketing visuals and tone. So that's on the superior translation. And finally, on client-proven execution. Again, you're not meant to really read these, but we can show you visually in one page as a talking tool to the executive team how real the movement is and how real the trade-off is. This looks like a simple slide. It belies very big changes operationally in terms of metrics, in terms of how people are rewarded, how people are invested, investments they make. And then we do a set of things like planning the strategic initiatives, designing the governance, setting up an initiative office or officer, hiring that person, setting up the work teams, describing the roles that people play in the work teams, identifying the executive sponsors and leads, work planning, chartering, milestone meetings, setting the calendar, detailing the work plans, detailing the milestones, rigor testing the milestones, having updates, tracking, and making the entire execution transparent so that the executive team and the people engaged in the journey can say, we are off track, we are not on the positioning, we are not being bold enough, or we are being too bold, we are moving too slow, or we are moving too fast, we are investing too much, we are investing too little. So that is around superior execution. I'm not going to go back through the 10, but I will take questions, starting with you.
Sure. So how long does it take to work out such a plan? How many man-hours?
I don't really think in man-hours, but I can tell you I typically do it in 16 weeks with a team of 3 or 4, but that greatly depends on the geographic scope and it depends on the number of brands if you're doing a brand portfolio or you're doing one brand or banner. But we're not talking months, right? We're talking months, but oftentimes marketing research firms will say something like this takes 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, and it's a black box. None of this is a black box. I didn't take you through the project schedule, but we meet routinely.
I'm just curious what sort of sample size you're dealing with to derive all these various attributes, and does the data collection, are you including that in the timeline?
It is in the timeline, yeah. So the largest one I've done is 35,000. They're typically more in the tens of thousands, around 10,000, not tens of, but 10. And that's unique, customers, individual customers. How you get the sample is very important too, because these things skew way, way too rosy if you only use loyalty customers, which is always a battle. No, you don't need to go to a panel. Yes, I do need to go to a panel because you won't get the right results.
In addition to all of the mathematical testing you do, is there a piece of this which is sort of interview-driven, focus group-driven, interest?
Yeah. Good question. Couple of answers. So from a client management standpoint, absolutely at the beginning of the project, we do the stakeholder interviews because this is all through the context of the business problem. I'm only doing this because I'm jazzed about the business problems it solves. I'm sure it seemed a little geeky on the methodology, but it's really connected to the business context and the business problems. So that happens. With regard to consumers or customers, we do group projective techniques at the beginning. They are not focus groups. They're much longer. They're much messier. They're projective work. So basically, we'll pair you off, and you will have to convince one another to the answer of whatever the activity is. It uses visual stimuli, object stimuli. What we want to know as much from those groups as the interactions you have together as you debate with your partner as what you tell the facilitator. Because what we're really trying to get at is that underlying latent type of work versus that rational, functional type of work. So that comes in at the front. And then at the back end, when you connect this to creative, right? This isn't consumer-friendly language. This is a tool for business people to make business decisions, not what you go out to the market on. So we either work with a creative agency that we trust, or we work with your creative agency. I will tell you, oftentimes this work ends in a creative agency review. But then we connect it to the creative on the back end. But after you know what you're going after, because we've just seen too many creative-driven approaches that steer very big companies into very niche and very small spaces.
We have time for one more quick question. What is the business problem that clients come to you with? For example, the client that's in the bottom right corner
Growth.
thinks they're doing great.
Growth. Number one, predictor of total shareholder return over time is growth. And the 10-year, the 7-year, and the 5-year perspective. And it is acutely important right now because we are in a low growth time in this country and in the developed economies of the world. Now, I personally can do a few more questions, and if we need to wrap up, I'm happy to wrap up.
We got to wrap up here, but you can stay after a couple minutes.
Okay. All right. Well, thank y'all. Appreciate your attendance.